Hey, welcome back to Dot Life, Dorchester's very own podcast, hyper-local podcast, that is, with news, analysis, commentary, sports, Buffalo Bills talk occasionally, but not this week because Aaron Caldwell is still traveling, not with us this week. So once again, you're stuck with me, Bill Forey, editor of the Dorchester Reporter, and for now, temporary host of the news segment of Dot Life Pod. There are other segments on this one, so stick around. But I am joined with reinforcements, thank goodness. We have two of our illustrious veteran reporters around the table here to help me out and dissect this week's news from Dorchester and from around Boston, actually. We're going to talk about a number of things. But first, let me introduce my distinguished guests here. First of all, to my immediate left, reporter correspondent, veteran, Bay State Banner editor, Yawu Miller is here. From the flip side, his latest effort and his new organization that's a great thing to subscribe to. Check out flipside.com.
Flipside.net.
.net.
Flipsidenews.net.
My bad. Okay, flipsidenews.net. Yawu, welcome back. This is your sophomore edition of Dot Life Pod. Seth Daniel is no stranger to Dot Life, the news editor of the Dorchester Reporter. Seth, thanks again for coming back.
My pleasure.
And I said no football talk. I said no Bills talk, but we'll talk briefly about the Patriots since, this is the format of this podcast, apparently.
Right. Yeah.
They did okay last weekend.
Yeah, we enjoyed watching them. They've become a joy to watch again. And do we talk about the playoffs?
I don't think we're talking about that just yet.
I'm thinking about it because it looks like they could be there.
Yeah, I would say so too. And, my Boston College Eagles continue to just, implode. So I'm all aboard the Drake May and company train.
Sundays for football, Saturday for crying.
Yeah, well, are you paying any attention to NFL at all?
None whatsoever.
Okay.
We don't even have a TV in the house.
Well, so you're completely immersed in the Boston city election and District 7 in particular, and we'll probably get to that a little bit later in the show. We're also going to talk about several things this week that are in the headlines of the Reporter. We're going to start with the chaos, really, at the district court level that's going on not only in Dorchester but across the Commonwealth, but particularly in Dorchester lately. And Seth did a bang-up job this week covering a pretty dramatic hearing in a Boston courtroom, and we're going to get to that in a couple of minutes here. We're going to talk about Carney Hospital. There was a big meeting last night in Lower Mills to discuss what's next, possibly at that 12-acre campus on Dorchester Avenue. We're going to talk about the Franklin Park White Stadium situation, which is still unfolding in courtrooms. And Yawu Miller was on top of that story, as he always is. We're going to get into a little Halloween preview. And also, we do have an election coming up, so we're going to talk about some of the city council at large and D7 races that are about to culminate on November 4th. But first, let's start with, I mentioned it at the top. Is chaos the right word to describe what's going on at the moment here, Seth? How would you describe the situation in Boston's courtrooms right now?
Almost beyond that, it's unthinkable. I mean, for those of us who've been in a courtroom for whatever reason, it's very mundane. There's procedures. If you're charged, you're going to have your day in court, but it's no longer the case. Mm-hmm. This was something that started a while back, and it's all because of public defenders and bar advocates who are, if you don't have the money for a lawyer, you're guaranteed a lawyer in our system. And those folks have been, particularly the bar advocates, have been asking for more money. The state's given them a little, but not what they asked for. So the problem is still ongoing, despite what was celebrated as a victory over the summer in a piece of legislation that they said was going to fix it all. Well, it didn't fix it all. And
we found out this week, really, that it's kind of gotten worse in some respects. Yeah. And to take a step back, we're talking about really a work stoppage that began in May with specifically the bar advocate community, which these are private attorneys who agree to take on public defender cases kind of on an ad hoc basis, and they get paid by the case to do that at a pretty low, below market rate, for lawyers anyways.
Right.
So their work stoppage, was really peaked in the summertime. But even this past week, what really triggered your story this week, Seth, was we became aware of the fact that there were hundreds of cases about to go before the Central Division of the Boston Municipal Court to dismiss hundreds of cases, including people who have been charged with assault and batteries and and things like, not minor things like,
No.
carrying high capacity firearms
Right.
illegally on the streets of Boston. There were a couple of people mentioned in your article who were arrested and charged with illegal gun possession at the Caribbean Carnival in August. And the thing that people should understand is these men and women who've been arrested and charged haven't had any access to an attorney or counsel, some of them for months. And now this hearing that happened that you covered on Tuesday was a judge saying, okay, the time has elapsed. We have to, fish or cut bait on these cases.
Right.
And in almost every case, they cut bait. They dismiss these cases.
Yeah. Almost, there were 212 from Dorchester alone, which is the majority. And it seems like, as we pointed out in our story, Dorchester is getting the short end of the stick. It seems like some of the other jurisdictions, other district courts, they might have lawyers who are taking cases. If something's egregious, they don't want to let it slip by. But it's not happening at Dorchester Court, and they seem to be getting on that list for dismissal, and they went through one by one for hours, dismissed without prejudice. And they were bad charges. We mentioned the one about child molestation. That was dismissed. There was one, a number of them, which were assault and battery with a dangerous weapon, the gun cases, many gun cases. There was the one gun case where the mother, she had a legal gun, but she threatened her children with the gun. Maybe they didn't clean their room. I'm not sure what they did, but that got dismissed.
Crazy stuff. And, we should note that the prosecutors, even if these cases have been dismissed, can refile these cases and bring charges against these, these alleged wrongdoers in the future. But there's a backlog here, and it's creating it's been a pressure across the Commonwealth. But I guess last we left this back in August, it seemed as though the legislature and the governor had come to an arrangement with some of the bar advocates, and we're hopefully bringing on some new full-time public defenders who work for an agency called CPCS. They take on the bulk of the public defender work in the Commonwealth.
Yeah, I mean, we're calling it a work stoppage. And what's really happening is, like, if you had a plumber and you called the plumber over and they charge $80 an hour and you're saying, I'm giving you 60, they might do that for a while and then say, hey, look, my rate's 80 and you keep paying them 60, so they're going to go work somewhere else. Essentially, that's what these attorneys are doing, is that they're just saying, we can't live off of this.
Yeah.
You don't pay a plumber what you're paying us. You pay plumbers more than you're paying us, and we can't live off of this. We need to find other work, which is what they're doing.
Right.
The legislature it seemed like a half measure. It wasn't what they asked. It wasn't, and it was like over time as well. I don't remember the specific numbers, but
they were
going
going from like $60 an hour to like 70 and then maybe 80 after a year and a half or two.
Yeah.
So it certainly was far from what the bar advocate community was asking for.
Yeah. And I mean, it's just going to get tougher if the budget takes a beating from what the feds are doing, et cetera. So.
We asked the DA's office to react to what happened on Tuesday. DA Kevin Hayden's office, and a spokesperson for him called it a very difficult day for the prosecutors working in these courts, but especially for victims who are concerned about these alleged offenders, seeking retribution, being back on the streets, et cetera, et cetera. What did you note from when you were watching these hearings, Seth? Were the prosecutors raising that issue before the decisions were made?
Yeah, on some of them. I mean, there were so many of them that they didn't say much about most of them. But they were saying this person is dangerous. This is we can't let this we have to find a different route. It was a little bit almost like I think I had mentioned it was like a contract negotiation, because you had a person from the lawyer side who was disputing the DA's office, who was trying to say, this is an exception. They're like, no, this isn't an exception. It should be dismissed. Right. And they went back and forth. Most of the time, dismissal carried the day. So that was one thing I noted. When
I was listening into it, I heard on a couple of occasions they tried to find and scramble and find a public defender, because I don't think anybody wanted, in certain cases, for this for these cases to be dismissed. They were pretty serious charges.
Right.
And also, let's not forget too, the accused themselves are kind of in limbo, right?
Yes,
like
they are.
some of them were held or detained for weeks. Others have been on house arrest, or they just have a cloud hanging over their head. I'm sure many of them want to get these things resolved and move on with their lives. This kind of limbo that people are under, hurts both sides of the justice system.
Right. Yeah.
What the judges are doing is just upholding the rule of law. I mean, that we have these laws in place. We've decided that this is going to be our system, that you can't hold people without a trial. You can't have a trial without people having access to defense. And, as a Commonwealth, we're not funding the system at a level where it works.
It feels like at the end of the day, there's been a political failure here.
Right.
There clearly was a decision made back in the summer that we're gonna sort of half measure the budgeting here for bar advocates and for public defenders who aren't well paid either, the full-time people. Right. They put $40 million into a fund to recruit, train, and staff more positions for CPCS, but that takes a while. And in the meantime, this is what we're talking. We wanted to alert the public to this week. Channel 5 did a story about this last night as well. And today, WGBH did a story, which I found interesting, that CPCS has just released a new incentive program. They're trying to get these bar advocates to take more cases to try to ease the backlog, promising them, one-time fees of like $2,500, actually up to $7,500 if they'll agree to clear 15 cases. So there's some movement here this week, and I think this, the media coverage is maybe driving that a bit.
Yeah. I think one of the things too, we mentioned about the refiling, and a lot of the cases that are the most egregious, they draw attention, right? But those will probably be refiled. I mean, I can't see why they wouldn't be, or they would be taken to a different court. I think the real losers are those who are, domestic violence cases, family members who are, stalkers. Those cases probably aren't going to be refiled. I mean, there was even one, a house that someone had broken in during the day, and it was, causing great personal fear was the charge, and that's not going to be refiled either. So there's all these things, and particularly in the domestic violence and the family violence issues. I've already seen where people can only be held 7 days, and they're let out. They go right back.
Right.
And there was a case we even pointed out where the guy had gone back 3 times, and it was like he tried to run over a pregnant woman, and this was the same victim 3 times. And for those people, I've already heard, anecdotally from people that they're considering leaving.
Wow.
Leaving their homes because this has just gotten over the top, and the police can't keep arresting these people over and over.
Yeah. Well, listen, we all want to, I think, within reason, buy into this image that Boston does have, and incredibly so, of one of the safest, cities in America. This whole national debate that's swirling because of the federal aggression against Boston. But, when things like this are happening, it does shake your confidence a bit, just that the local system isn't as sturdy as we would like, and perhaps some more attention needs to be put at the local political level to getting that shored up a bit.
Yep.
So we're going to keep covering this, Seth. I know that you're on this story. I want to turn now to another big headline over the last year, which is Carney Hospital. Mm-hmm. And I covered a meeting last night at the Lower Mill Civic Association. About 100 people turned out, which is kind of a big crowd for Lower Mill Civic lately, to hear the new development team that's been hired by the current ownership of the Carney Hospital property. Tom O'Brien is one of the partners from HYM Investments, and Reverend Jeffrey Brown, who has his own for-profit development company as well, have teamed up, and they've been hired by Apollo Global Management, which is the massive multinational company that owns the Carney site. This was their debut performance in front of the Civic Group to, as they said, to listen to the community. And they got an earful last night. I think this was the first opportunity, unfortunately for Tom O'Brien and Jeffrey Brown, for people in Dorchester post-Carney's closure to kind of vent. And there's a lot of raw anger out there still about the way things went down last year in the Carney's closure. And not only the closure of the hospital, but the closure of the medical building on the campus, which was very important as well in servicing senior citizens, children, families in Dorchester and Mattapan and other communities that surround us. So I have to say, last night, I think Mr. O'Brien and Reverend Brown both got kind of a broadside from some folks who were just waiting to condemn the way that Carney.
Right.
And in fairness to them, they weren't part of that. They've been hired just recently in the last month to come up with a plan to redevelop it. But, the people that they're working for were somewhat complicit in this. Apollo Global Management is the landlord. They were getting large sums of money from Steward, which failed. But the key thing that I took away from last night is how much people really want healthcare use restored to that site. Many people want a full-blown hospital restored. I have to say it's unlikely given the economic conditions and the funding conditions federally. But Tom O'Brien repeatedly did say that's his number one priority for the site too. It was an interesting night. There's going to be 3 abutters meetings over the next couple of months that they're going to really focus on the immediate neighbors who live like adjacent to the Carney campus. There's 3 scheduled meetings. And then O'Brien and Reverend Brown are also going to be going around to other Dorchester civic groups over the next couple of months. You should be on the watch for that. Are either of you picking up any of those vibrations of what people, kind of wish list, hope that comes next at the Carney? Seth, do you want to?
Yeah, I mean, I heard particularly from the Fields Corner Civic, which, the Vietnamese community was a big user of the Carney,
Yeah.
As well as its feeder institutions. So, I mean, they wanted a hospital. They wanted a hospital back. I think that people are intrigued by the idea of some sort of a smaller hospital with senior housing. Mm-hmm. But market rate housing facing the woods is not on anyone's menu that I've heard.
Well, it did come up last night at the meeting several times, and I think Tom O'Brien and Reverend Brown both mentioned those are possible uses. But to their credit, they're trying to listen at this point and absorb all this feedback. The other key voice last night was Councilor John Fitzgerald, who spoke and is really acting as a mediator here. He was part of the Dorchester Working Group, which is it's important to keep in mind. There was a very detailed report issued this past May, delivered to the governor and the mayor, outlining possible reuses for the Carney. Housing wasn't really anywhere near the top of the list.
Right.
There were 5 key recommendations, and they all had to do with reuse of restoring healthcare and social services on the site. So that's pretty broad, and certainly housing could fit into a social service, but it wasn't explicitly mentioned. I wonder, Yahoo, if you've picked up any of the sort of post-Carney closure stressors as you're covering Dorchester, Roxbury, and the whole city.
I haven't. It's not an issue that's been on my radar, but I mean, it seems like there's a big hole in healthcare coverage in Boston. That if you look at where their nearest hospitals are to Dorchester, it's a pretty long, commute, like a pretty long ride in an ambulance out there. I mean, I myself have used the Carney for emergency visits just because, it's a lot more convenient coming from Roxbury than it is heading downtown. So,
yeah, the wait times at Milton Hospital, which is the closest hospital, are pretty pronounced, especially since the Carney closed. And the alternative is a ride into BMC from that part of Dorchester is kind of a hike. And when we're talking about some urgent issues and unfortunately occasional violence, that that lack of resource is really felt. But it's felt even in a deeper way just by the routine things like just seniors who have to get dialysis treatment or diagnostic tests and have to schlep into Longwood or wherever they need to go. Those things can't really be done in the neighborhood setting anymore. The health centers, which are a great resource and network, don't have that level of diagnostics or sometimes, so of course, surgical and things like that. So it was the takeaway from last night. I'll leave it at this: is people really, really want a comprehensive healthcare service there. It may not be the traditional hospital that we knew 50 years ago. It won't be, let's face it. Right. But something that's a robust healthcare use is a top of the list. And I think they got that loud and clear last night. One other issue that's still bubbling and won't go away, probably much to the chagrin of the Wu administration and the Boston Unity Sports Partners. I think that's the name of the organization, is White Stadium. And Yawu, you covered that issue this week for us.
Right. So the Emerald Necklace Conservancy has released it, or filed its appeal. So what Judge Matthew Nestor found, I think it was in April, was that that the land on which White Stadium sits was transferred to the George Robert White Fund and the Boston Public Schools, and because it's not, it's property of the school department, it's not parkland, that there's the Article 97 requirements don't apply to that parcel. So that Article 97 is basically a state law. It's in the Constitution that if public land, public recreation land, parkland is being, a change of use for that has to go through the legislature. Mm-hmm. And this is a change of use. It would move from, public land to something that's owned partially by a private entity or leased by a private entity. Pretty major change, change of use. And the Boston Unity soccer players in the city of Boston said, this is Boston Public Schools
a BPS
land.
facility,
right?
Yeah, exclusively.
So basically, what they're arguing two things: the Emerald Necklace Conservancy. One, that the land surrounding the stadium is parkland, yeah, and that they're planning major alterations to that land, a new roadway, putting in utilities. That the plan that the city and BUSP is advancing would have commercial uses, the beer garden, concessions, mm-hmm, merchandise sales, etc. And it will need lots of new utilities, so that upsets the parkland. And then they're moving in something on the order of 130, 140 tour buses to bring people to the stadium. And they will have to create new roadways for that to happen. So right, basically, they're saying that that's a change of use in public parkland that doesn't apply. And then within the stadium, or within the land that's owned by Boston Public Schools, the George Robert White Trust Fund had a clause against joint ventures. And they're saying that this would be a joint venture.
Yeah.
Between the Boston Unity Soccer and the city of Boston.
Well, you guys both covered this last court ruling that happened. It feels like it was back in the spring. Am I
It was
wrong?
in April, yeah.
I mean, why are we just getting an appeal now in October? Like, why the timing? Why the delay?
I don't know. I don't have an answer to that. I mean, they've been working on it, sort of probably going over it with lawyers, or even deciding whether they would do it. It was a pretty hard slapdown from Matthew Nestor, but what they're alleging, the Emerald Necklace Conservancy is saying that there were a lot of issues that Nestor did not rule on. Mm-hmm. And also Nestor said that they had no authority, like they didn't have standing to challenge the joint use thing with, like, under the George Robert White Trust Fund guidelines. They didn't have standing to do that, and they're arguing again that they do have standing and that this issue should be litigated.
Well, for sure they have every right to appeal. I'm not quarreling with that. But two major things have happened since that ruling. We've had a city election where the mayor won by 49 points, right, and sort of won the precincts around Franklin Park, and not that should be the green light of all green lights for the stadium, but the other thing that happened was the financing from Bank of America. I believe it was Bank of America agreed to finance the stadium's construction, mm-hmm, through BUSP. Two major developments, and now an appeal at this point. I know you asked the Wu administration for reaction, and they basically said, this is too much. They should drop this case.
Yeah.
But you also talked to the Franklin Park defenders. In addition to the Emerald Necklace Conservancy, there's a coalition of neighbors who, right from the beginning of this, have been against it. They've been steadfast. They may account for 50, 100 people in their core, Franklin Park defenders. It doesn't sound like they've moved an inch.
Right. I mean, I think that yeah, I mean, I think the Bank of America probably looked at the election and said, this is a done deal. I mean, these are people who vote. I mean, it's, 22% of the voters turned out.
Yeah.
It was overwhelming support for Wu, even among people who disagreed with her on White Stadium.
Yeah.
I mean, but, it's just 22% of registered voters who, maybe 200,000 people in the city, almost 700,000 people are the kids who play football in Boston public schools well represented in that? Probably not. Can they play football in White Stadium once Boston Union soccer player takes over? No, they can't. So
not during the regular season. They might be able to play a playoff game or something once this is done. But
yeah, not what George Robert White stadium was created for. It was kind of, if you look at the outside of the stadium, there's a frieze of children playing football. But yeah,
well, both of you, all of us live in close, relatively close proximity. But you guys, especially you, Seth. I mean, you've been hearing from neighbors unhappy about the parking regimen around game days, et cetera. The buses are a big issue, shuttles, et cetera. But post-election now, what's the sentiment that you're picking up on?
I think that was really front and center for a while, but when they postponed the season starting next year they're going to play at Gillette next year.
Yes.
And then they'll come back. That kind of died down a little bit. I anticipate it's going to come back. I mean, when they decide to come back, it's just going to be a real tricky thing to get that many people in there that many times a year. And without cars.
Right.
I think the traffic in the area, it's something that people routinely complain about. They complain about the notion of central running bus lines on Blue Hill Avenue. I think people are sort of at a boiling point with some of this stuff, the way it is.
Yeah.
And to introduce that on game days, if there's game days on weekdays, it's kind of hard to see how it wouldn't be like a little piece of the Fenway in Roxbury, like essentially like things could just grind to a halt. And, you have a lot of public transit that relies on Seaver Street and Columbus Ave. You have a lot of people, kids coming home from school. It's, it's just kind of hard to see how it all fits together. But Saturdays, games starting at, say, 5, 6 o'clock, they're saying no parking permit between 3 p.m. and 10 p.m. It puts a damper on people's weekend plans if they're planning cookouts or any kind of family gatherings or parties, etc. So,
well, however this particular appeal resolves, no matter what, the next couple of years are going to be interesting at that local level politically. And I want to turn to the District 7 City Council race because, you also wrote about that this week. We're now in the final stretch. Early voting's about to start this coming weekend, October 25th and 26th. There are two finalists, Saeed Ahmed and Minyard Culpepper are the two finalists in District 7. You watched a forum this past week, or a couple of forums, in which they were featured, and on several occasions didn't really have a clear answer on some of those major issues. And maybe you talk us through what's this race like here in the final stretch?
It's I guess the overriding thing here is the strongest case for ranked choice voting that we've seen in a long time, because each of the two candidates got about 15% of the vote.
Big field, 11 candidates.
Right, out of 11 candidates, there were 5 who got around 1,000 votes, and only 2 of those 5 advanced to the final election. So basically, 70% of voters didn't get their first choice. So we're down to Saeed Ahmed and Minyard Culpepper. Culpepper seems like he's getting the majority, the lion's share of endorsements from elected officials. Ayanna Pressley announced yesterday. Several state reps and local elected officials have supported Culpepper.
He won the endorsement of 2 of his former opponents, who finished, I think, 4th and 5th in the September election.
And I'm sorry, man.
Sam Hurtado and Saeed
Saeed Abdi Karim. Yeah.
Yes,
Okay. So Yeah, so it's almost like people are circling, like there's two camps and people are circling wagons around
Yeah.
Culpepper. He's somebody who's grown up in the community, he's worked in the community for decades, so he has a lot of institutional support. You can see that in some of the endorsements he's gotten. Ahmed is a lot younger. I think Culpepper is in his 70s and Ahmed is in his 30s or 40s. He's certainly did a lot of door knocking and a lot of campaigning. He did well, reasonably well throughout the district. And whereas Culpepper's strength was right in Roxbury, around where he lives in Ward 12. Though it's hard to say, how it's going to shake out. You're looking at, to what extent do these endorsements really matter? It'll be a good test case for that. I haven't seen anybody on doors. I don't know whether Culpepper has people out there knocking or if he's out there door knocking, but that's going to matter.
Yeah, you would think it'd be a ground game here that makes a difference. And, Seth, what we don't have is a mayor's race to help draw it out. It'll have to be the at-large contest maybe that helps D7's turnout, although D7 has its own engaged constituency, obviously. But there is a contest at the at-large race that we're watching, and it really has to do with Henry Santana and Frank Baker.
Right. The two of them seem to be, and Valdez, too. Alexandra Valdez has made a little bit of a comeback here.
She got the support this week of former Mayor, U.S. Labor Secretary Marty Walsh.
She did.
Who the only other candidate he endorsed was Frank Baker. So two non-incumbents that Marty has endorsed.
Right. I just pulled up a list of her endorsements from city councilors and state elected officials, but I didn't write anything down. But there were like 5 or 6 endorsements that she announced over the last week. So,
how do these endorsements actually manifest, though, in this race at this stage? Yeah, we were talking about this earlier. Late in the game endorsement like Ayanna Presley or Marty Walsh, big names.
Because I want to write about that. So in 2013, when Walsh made the final after the preliminary, it was just Walsh and John Connolly. What was significant with Walsh was that pretty much every black elected official endorsed him.
Yep.
And I think that made a difference in that race because, it was sort of like the balls on the rim. And I think that kind of tipped it in for him because the black community in Boston, progressives, and, really helped push him over the line. He was drawing on a base of voters here in Dorchester and South Boston, that's a little bit different than what Connolly was drawing from, but he was able to, pull in black voters, and I think that those endorsements mattered. Yeah. I believe, and I want to sort of test this theory out and talk to some people who really know that in an at-large race where people don't just come out for one person, or they might just come out to vote for one person, but if they see somebody and they see like, oh yeah, my candidate has endorsed that candidate, then it could make a difference.
Yeah.
You had mentioned him endorsing 2 non-incumbents, and with Frank, it's been interesting to watch how I don't know that he's really courting a lot of these endorsements, but I see that he's noticed where he was not very strong, and now I see him going those places. He's had a ton of fundraisers.
Yeah, and Baker's raised more money than anybody, I think, in this race, other than maybe Councilor Louis Jouen. But of the everybody besides that, he's certainly been in the lead there.
I think he thought he was going to do, and I don't know, but I think he thought he was going to do a lot better in East Boston than he did.
Yeah.
And it was interesting where Aaron Murphy, who you might think is similar, did quite well in East Boston, and Frank in the same places didn't. So I think he's working a lot there. He's focusing on Charlestown too. There were a lot of votes in Charlestown left on the table. So
and Mayor Wu has certainly been focused on Henry Santana in the last couple of weeks.
Right. I think Santana has he's received a lot of endorsements from, Wu's endorsement comes with volunteers with work, like
Yeah.
city officials can work for him. But he also Santana also received endorsements from progressive groups, including JP Progressives, and they will also work on behalf of a counselor. And again, people are showing up to an at-large thing. They might have one or two people they want to vote for, and then they get a card from JP Progressives that says, "Hey, vote for Santana." They might that can actually make a difference. Baker has not received those kinds of endorsements. He appears to have worked harder on this race, and he's working harder, than some of the other candidates. So
Yeah.
it'd be really interesting to see how he does.
You also had an opponent endorse an opponent.
Who's that?
Well, Ruth Z endorsed people who were running in the race against her. So she endorsed Santana.
Mm-hmm.
Who else did she endorse? I don't think she did Valdez, but yeah, she endorsed Santana. So technically they're running against each other.
Yeah, I guess they're
that's-
going for the same pool of votes, probably.
Sure.
But
Well,
everybody has
Ruthie's
four.
way out in number one, and
True.
Santana is way out in number four. There's thousands of votes separating them, so she's not losing any sleep over that.
No.
Since I have you both here pre-election, and I don't know if you're going to be here next week or not, or if I'm going to be here next week for that matter, give me your top four predictions. I'm going to put you on the spot here.
Me?
Yeah,
Okay,
both
I'll
of you.
start. Yeah, I'd say Ruth Z, Julia Mejia, Aaron Murphy, and I'm going to pick Frank Baker in the fourth spot.
Who you got?
I'd go the same with Seth, and I think that Baker is in play. I think it's still closer than many people think. What we're looking at in this race is, with the mayor not on the ballot, will the universe of voters shrink? And if so, does that advantage Baker? I think it might. But,
Yeah, I think you're probably right about that. But I'm gonna just to keep things interesting go with Louis Juan, Mejia, Murphy, and Santana. And I think Baker finishes fifth, just close behind them.
Are we putting money on this gentleman?
I'm willing to wager something. Let's think
got some
about
pennies
that.
in here.
Maybe some Halloween candy, because I want to
Yeah,
talk about
there we
that.
go.
One secret sauce for Marty Walsh all these years, and super voters in Ward 17 know this well. The man gives out very large candy bars from his porch. Sorry about that, Marty, but you maybe have to buy some more this year. He gives out the big supersized candy, and there's a line around the block for it. Halloween in Dorchester is still a big deal in certain neighborhoods, and definitely in Lower Mills it is. There's a block party happening that night, and the city has a grant program now that helps fund it. Several neighborhoods are taking advantage of it. Meeting House Hill, Lower Mills, Savin Hill, a couple of other ones that I've seen, and also the police stations have open houses for kids. So if you're looking to find out more about that, check out this week's Reporter. We have a listing of some of that on page 2. But is Halloween still a big deal on your streets? Trick-or-treating?
This is funny. I was privy to a conversation at one of the local church parishes about whether they should do. They have an influx of children.
Yeah.
Should they do a trunk or treat in the parking lot or not? And it's 50-50. A lot of people are absolutely not. That's a terrible idea. And other people are like, we love Halloween. It's fun. The kids dress up. You know what? I think that there is sort of a little bit of a wave in the Caribbean community, and especially where that's seen as, Halloween is really seen as
The occult.
satanic,
Yeah.
And-
There's always been a touch of that in certain
Yeah.
communities, but it tends to get offset by the kids,
Right, and
they
parents.
they go out and do it on their own if they have to. But yeah, I've noticed that too. What about in your neighborhood? Yeah,
It's sparse.
Yeah.
It's sparse in my corner of Roxbury up around Grove Hall. There, sometimes there are streets that will, put on a little show. A lot of kids go, they just do the destination Halloween
that's
things. They
right,
go to
yeah.
Dunster Street in Jamaica Plain.
Yeah.
It's sad, but there are a lot fewer kids in Boston now than there were when you and I were growing up in the olden days, right?
Right.
And most people have one kid or no kids, and there's not the same culture of kids being out, of people knowing their neighbors. So yeah.
Well, the kids that are hitting the streets, they're usually, I can tell you, coming to my street or Marty Walsh's next door on Butler, and they will be this Halloween. And by the way, it's great. I think it's awesome. I mean, they're closing the streets down on those 2 streets.
Right.
And I think it's smart for the city to fund these mini grants. I think it's only like $500 or whatever, but
Right.
people can have little block parties, put some sawhorses up, block the street.
Right.
The one thing that does freak me out in the city is kids running around on the streets and people still flying around.
Cars,
So,
yeah.
Please, in those hours next week, be mindful of that, be safe, and go out with your kids if you can and make sure that they're safe doing this. But hey, have fun. And I really appreciate both of you guys joining. Seth,
Good to be here.
from 15 feet away, thanks
Yes,
for making
it
the
was
trip.
a terrible trip.
And Yawu, thanks for coming in and joining us again. So that's it for this week's segment of Dot Life, the Dot News segment. Thanks for coming, and looking forward to having Erin Caldwell back next week. She's still traveling, and she will be back with some new content about Dorchester, UK. There was a little technical glitch in this week's episode, so you won't see it this week, but don't worry, it's coming, and we all can't wait to see that. So thanks for joining us. See you next time.